Hello, my name is Susie Harding, and I am the Membership and Program Coordinator for Shaker Museum. This is a re-recording of the presentation I gave at our final Zoom gathering for our knit-along last Sunday on December 19th. We had a technical difficulty with our recording, so I'm going to redo the presentation now, and at the end I will include images that were shared from some of the participants who did just beautiful work. So if you're watching this video, thank you for joining us. And I will hop into the screen share to be able to show you the presentation. So we've been talking in our knit-along about Sister Elvira Hewlett and about the Shakers. I want to talk tonight a little bit about the museum and how we are able to use our resources to tell these amazing stories. Shaker Museum was founded in 1950 by John S. Williams, who observed the decline of the population in the Shaker communities around him. And he set about collecting Shaker artifacts, but also the tools they used to make those artifacts and the documentation that told their story. Rather than being interested only in their material culture, he really approached it like an anthropologist, and he wanted to collect as much information about how they lived as he could. Just last week, we hosted a Zoom conversation between Jerry Grant, our Director of Collections, and Stephen G. Williams, the son of our founder, about the earliest days of the museum. In addition to being a really charming look back at the museum in the 1950s, it really highlighted some of the things that make our museum so special. And when we are out of the screen share, I did put a link in the chat, which you would be welcome to share and watch to get to take a look at that presentation. As I'm sure I've said to this group, we try to present the Shaker artifacts in a way that demonstrates that they are products of Shaker beliefs and values. So a cupboard like this is not just a beautiful cupboard that happened to be made by a Shaker, but the beauty of this piece is the result of the maker believing that society could be perfected and paradise on earth created through communal living, gender and racial equality, pacifism, confession of sin, celibacy, and separation from the world. So too, our collection is special not just because of what is in it, but because of how it was gathered with intention and the spirit in which that was done. So as I said, the link is in the chat, and I encourage you to watch that presentation because it was really quite special and seemed relevant to what we were going to be talking about at the end of the knit-along. So the result is that about half of our collections were purchased directly from still active Shaker communities. So their provenance is clean and clear. Additionally, we hold secondary sources in terms of copies of microfilm from a long list of other scholarly institutions, which include the Library of Congress and Harvard and Hamilton College, which has an amazing collection, as well as all our other Shaker organizations that we have relationships with. So you can imagine that searching for anything in our collection is a little bit like a needle in a haystack. It's also like a needle in many haystacks. Luckily, because we have had such amazing people working on this for years, we can begin to access the wealth of knowledge that is there and be able to tell some stories. One of the first ways I really became aware of how incredible it is what we can find was when I was going to do a program reading this storybook to children. And I had a conversation with Jerry Grant, who said, let me tell you a little bit about what's behind this book. It is the story of Sister Cornelia French, who was brought to the Shakers of Mount Lebanon in 1842, and she lived there until she died until 1914. And the storybook says that she was possibly an orphan. In fact, she did come to the Shakers with her mother, but they were separated from each other, as was the Shaker way, to fully integrate them into the larger communal life of brothers and sisters. And Jerry was able to tell me that although they lived in separate villages, mother and daughter, We know from journals and records that when family relatives were coming to visit Cornelia's mother, and I'm not sure I remember right, but I believe it was Hancock, that Cornelia was dispatched to do errands at Hancock for those days so that she would be able to see or maybe have some kind of a visit with this extended family. And that was because of journals of domestic daily occurrences. So after about the 1820s, deacons and deaconesses were required to keep public family journals. And that would be something like one of the repercussions of living in these big families, of being able to keep a record and keep track of where everyone was. Domestic journals were useful for the Shakers and have proven invaluable for us to have that information. This is a picture of Cornelia French that is in our collection that you can find by searching our historical photographs. And then additionally, we also have pictures of baskets made by Cornelia French. She was a prolific basket maker and particularly good at the quatrefoil style, which you can see on the bottom of this basket here on the right. And that was a style unique to Mount Lebanon. The next story thread that I think is fascinating and really demonstrates what our collection can do was a search started by a headline, a simple headline that said "Shaker found dead." And it was in the article that announced an inquest into what turned out to be a death of purely natural causes. There's a blog about this in our blog tab, and the blog mentions that Shakers often requested an inquest to assure that the public that there was no foul play. They were aware that such a rumor could severely tarnish their reputation and be devastating in terms of their relationship with the community and recruiting. So while the death in this case itself was not much of a story, the blog site posts a combination of articles from outside the Shaker collection and within it that tells us that the particular Shaker who had died, William Koch, was born in Germany. He was a former soldier and lawyer, and he had come to the United States to work with his brother, who was a printer and ran a popular newspaper, which was written in German. And according to the obituary, which was written by Brother Alonzo Hollister, it was Brother William's commitment to communistic principles which induced him to visit the Shakers of Mount Lebanon in the fall of 1884. So the blog post is interesting because it demonstrates the unexpected turns that research can take. It shows the value of the sources from within the Shaker records and the secondary records that came from newspapers and other sources. And I also think it's just an interesting story because adult recruits of Shakers brought such life experience and skills and time and talent with them that to have a printer come and be able to help Brother Alonzo with the printing of records and manifestos really speaks to one of the unique things about Shakers that made them so productive and really speaks to the excellent work they did. They had a lot of talent coming in and they used it well. So I next want to share a few ways, sort of random searches that I did that might demonstrate how you could have a nice time doing some research yourself. Having heard about the domestic journals, I searched the historical archives that way, and I happened to see the part of a title that came up that said a book containing the measures of different individuals, which seemed sort of a shocking, not very Shaker title. So I clicked on it, and the rest of it said, and designed solely for shoemakers, kept by W.C. Landbridge in 1877. And so it's really just a list by the shoemaker of what size feet everybody had. And it struck me as, although not perhaps interesting in itself, a sure way to demonstrate where a Shaker was living at a certain time. And in looking at this page, I picked just out of what happened to leap off the page in handwriting I could read, Eunice Cantrell. And so I wondered what I could find out about this person. And so I looked in the historical photographs, and sure enough, immediately found a picture of Eunice. It had a note on the bottom that inscribed on the back of that was that she was the sister of Adelaide Cantrell and eldris Elizabeth Cantrell, and that they were all daughters of Henry Cantrell Sr. and Eunice Cantrell Sr. So we then found out that Elizabeth was an eldris, and that was interesting. And a quick further search about Henry brought up a deed of sale from before his joining the Shakers, in which he had sold land. And this would have been an important kind of thing for the Shakers to know about or have, because they were very careful that people tidied up their financial matters before signing a covenant and joining the community, so that if there was disagreement or discord, people weren't coming after the community for things not taken care of before people joined. So without being able to have a full-fledged story, it struck me as just a really good demonstration of at random and how interesting things you can find. And so I invite you to do that and to play around with it a little bit. So now to the knitting. Sue, and I apologize, Sue, I don't know your last name and I haven't quite been able to find it yet. But I was so grateful that she shared these images of her early work. She's shared with us that she's taking these out and doing them again and deciding on the width. And she ran into an issue that I ran into as I was trying to figure these out, which is that there is clearly an optimal width of a strip that one might use to make a spiral like Elvira did. And the number of stitches is hard to tell somebody, because I think it's dependent on the weight of the yarn and the size of the needle and the gauge. And so it's a little bit trial and error what works. But I just love the color scheme, and I know it's gonna turn out beautifully. This one came from Carolyn Webb, who used a Noro yarn. So it's a self-variegated yarn, and she was really enjoying being able to just relax and knit in the shape and let the colors in the yarn do the work. And it's mesmerizing and beautiful. So we're really grateful for that. Leona Smith sent us these next two pictures. She was still working on her piece, but was so helpfully kept it sort of blocked out for us to be able to see well. And you can see that she's adding her concentric circles around the outside. And she very helpful gave us an idea of how wide it would be, about 30 inches wide. So I know I found it surprising working on this project that you can come up with a really substantial piece fairly quickly. They're projects that go quickly indeed. Debbie Brunner shared this with us, which was just absolutely remarkable. She really wanted to recreate one of the Elvira rugs as closely as she could, and I think she came just impressively close. I would be careful about where I posted this, lest somebody think I took it out of the collection and put on my kitchen floor, because it's just remarkable. So that is really amazing. And I notice here, it looks like she might have used I-cord for her braid around the edge, which is a neat interpretation, and meant that, the colors are quite exact there. And this final one was shared with us by Abby Curtis, who made it for her uncle. She knit a sweater for her toddler age son in these colors, and then made this for her uncle, and continued to make some knitted items in this color scheme for various members of her family as a way to help everybody feel connected while they're all still far apart. And that I just thought was a lovely interpretation of Shaker values, and a wonderful way to honor Sister Elvira. It's just beautiful. Sarah Wolf shared a picture of her with knitting an endless project, she explained, with sock yarn, that when people give her their tidbits and their ends, she adds square after square after square, and really enjoyed knitting her friends into this Afghan that she can just grow forever. And we thought that was really a nice and common thread among knitters, that these relationships we form as we share this hobby are really special. And it's been just a pleasure to get to know people, even